everyone. I'm Linda Nickell, and welcome to the Happiness Hour, a weekly photography webinar that helps photographers from all over the country connect, inspire, and create. My guests share tips, techniques, and the stories behind their photographs that inspire us to look at the world a little differently. The schedule for upcoming presentations is on my website at lindanickell.com. And if you haven't subscribed to the Happiness Hour YouTube channel, please check it out for sessions that you may have missed. Tonight's guest is Nikola Olic. Nikola is a Texas-based photographer with an exquisite portfolio of architectural photographs. His work has been featured in respected publications that include the New York Times, the Washington Post, Vogue, and National Geographic Serbia. And that's just to name a few of them. His photographs have also been exhibited in museums and galleries around the world. Photographs that celebrate the artistic design of modern architecture in sharp edges, soft curves, abstracts, often lit in natural light and in brief moments that are in the shadows. Nikola describes his work as equal parts documentarian, precisionist, and formalist, a collection of unmanipulated photographs seeking poetry and portraiture and architecture. If you're on Instagram, you can find him at Nikola Olic, and you can connect with him through his website at structurephotography.org. In tonight's presentation, Bending the Rules of Architectural Photography, Nikola will share his photographs and remind us to look up the next time we get the opportunity to venture into an urban playground with our cameras. Welcome to the Happiness Hour, Nikola.
Thank you so much, Linda. What a wonderful introduction. It's lovely to be here, and it's lovely to be connected with everybody. So many people interested in photography. So I think you said it really well. I will just say a few more things about my photography because I think that really sets the tone for enjoyment, for being inquisitive and getting the most out of this, and perhaps asking questions about the photographs you're going to see. So I will shortly share my screen.
Yeah.
I wanted to make an important comment that you will quickly see in my photographs, that my photography departs significantly from classic commercial architectural photography, as photographs that I take can reimagine architecture as contemporary sculptures and monuments of our shared modern everyday. Because most of the photographs you will see tonight balance between the familiar and the unfamiliar. Every photograph that I offer and publish always comes with the exact coordinates where they were taken from my travels around the US and around the world. To just anchor this in the now, in the here, and you can click the link and you can go into Google Street View and you can look around. As I look around and I discover these shapes and forms that are interesting to me, I share them and go, there they are, they exist. So it's just a shared experience with anybody that does photography. And as I travel, I do this very lightly with a very small, single, relatively inexpensive non-DSLR camera, which I figured out is the best way to do photography for me, through a lot of sort of trial and error and trying different cameras. So that is the definition of my photography. This photograph is from New York City, and I have been shaking my fist and thinking about what to do with these buildings that I see for years, as I often go in September and take photographs in New York City. And what this does for me is I'm using the building on the right, which is United Nations building in New York City, and it really, once you examine it, it loses the appearance of a building. It looks like a corrupt JPEG file. It looks like something went wrong in half of my image, that it's just green and gray and black and sort of rectangles everywhere. And I find that to be a sort of surrealist element in photography. And when I see large structures that do something like that, I try to think of this as a large sculpture that exists that we all walk by every day. And then the Chrysler building behind it on 42nd Street, it is very recognizable, but this kind of cuts it down the middle, and you kind of see half of it where it appears to be more of a sort of a rocket of some kind. And I like to play with familiarity, that I can assume that some of these are familiar to you, but how exactly they dance together might not be clear from this. And this is taken from quite a bit of a distance. I'm across the East River and on the west side of Queens with a zoom lens. And so I can play around a lot with sort of moving things around. By me moving around a little bit, I can adjust buildings and I can place them where I want them to be. And so a lot of things worked out here, and I fine-tuned it to where I took probably 150 photographs that it's exactly down the middle. It looks like a collage, but it never is. I don't do collages. This is all single actual photographs. This is taken from the same spot, roughly, just looking a little bit further south. And the name of this photograph to me is just Tetris. All I see is really the blue rectangles, the blue kind of square shapes in the middle. What you see is really three different buildings in the front. The left, the right, and the center are separate buildings. And everything is red. It's brick. It's windows that are kind of brown. And everything comes together in this sort of very consistent visual space. And then you start zooming in with your eyes and trying to understand, where does one building stop? Where does the other one start? But what I see here is these well-balanced blue spaces that are quoting the rule of thirds, if you will, that I'm dividing almost perfectly into the rule of thirds, which I like to do because it gives you a false sense of security that, like, oh yeah, I get this. Okay, rule of thirds. But when you try to kind of decipher what is happening, there is simply not enough information to know where does it end, where does it start in the actual physical space. In this case, I had a short amount of time in Washington, D.C. It was really bad weather, and I usually really benefit from very, very good light and strong light because my camera doesn't really operate well when I don't have enough light. It's just not, especially if I use the zoom a lot. So here it's the Washington Monument and the Museum of African American History. I don't know the full name, I apologize. And so I find it to be just a wonderful mix of shapes. That the museum on the left that normally has a red bronze color to it, in this weather, everything looks like a black and white photograph, but it is not. It is a color photograph. And there are these triangles that exist between the monument and the museum facade. There's one triangle and there's another one, and then there's a release at the top. So this is the right distance between the two of them as the modern sculptures around me. And to say modern, really not much modern about the Washington Monument, but I sort of, in a formalist setting, I'm flattening this without much commentary on the buildings, and I'm putting them together as just, these are big structures around me. And the world being full of them is such a fascinating experience to go around and absorb and identify them. This is taken during COVID. This is in Dallas, right in front of the Dallas Museum of Art. And what you see is a regular building, the brown building in the upper right, and the structure in front of it, the white in the lower right, is a facade of a garage. I say this, I share this, but in essence, I don't share this with the photograph. I don't give it in the name. The name of this is Unwrapping the Sky. It looks like I took the clouds from the lower left and just kind of wrapped them around this building. And so it enters, in my mind, this surrealist experience, almost something like one of my favorite painters, Rene Magritte, that you know when you look at his painting that there is going to be some sort of an equation to solve, almost some sort of a game that is being played. And in a lighthearted way, without trying to be overly smart about this, I seek those things. This is the reality of my city. And so I rarely care about the clouds making much of a role in my photographs. They're far too unpredictable and hard to control. But in this case, it worked. I just kind of waited a little bit and lined up. And this did require to stand in the middle of a pretty busy Ross Avenue. But it was COVID, so not a lot of traffic. And so it worked out. And I would have to move back and forth 10, 20 feet up and down Ross to kind of line things up. But the white lines of the facade of the garage are just such a unexpected. It's hard to decipher. Is this right in front of my camera? Is it quarter of a mile in front of me, far enough? And this ambiguity to me is a wonderful connection to the world around us. And again, always anchored in the truth that I'm not collaging things. And this is not so much a matter of, do you trust me that this is real, as much as there is an urban public sharing of this visual information, that this exists and exists everywhere where there are structures that have been built, which are mostly what interests me. So how did they come together? And what is it that the architect maybe had in mind versus what can I do with this that might not be what the architect would like to do with this? And this is also where I depart from classic architectural photography in a joyful way, that I'm not sure an architect would really want to hire me to take photographs of their buildings, because I'm not sure what is it that I would like to do with it. And this has happened a few times that I've been commissioned to take photographs. Sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't, but it's a wonderful way for me to explore the built environment. This is two structures, as I frequently have. I guess the third is the air and the cloud behind on the left side, the sky. This is a building, I think, One Manhattan Plaza, or whatever the name might be, in New York City, in Manhattan. And the wiring and the cables you see are the Brooklyn Bridge. And I have tried to do something with the cables of the Brooklyn Bridge for years. And I did not do anything until this photograph. And what works for me is that I am re-questioning what is the middle of this photograph. And that dark central section is really just the side of this building, but it has less light and it's just very sort of compressed. But that to me is the visual center, but it sort of is a whole side of a building. And the windows of the building go sort of at an angle that nicely matches the cables of the bridge. And the cables of the bridge by themselves are sort of this unappealing element. They almost look like barbed wire, but they're so saturated. There's so much of it that it has its own texture, I would almost say. Like I could strum it like a guitar. And so it was enough for me to think, what can I do with this in a visual setting of a photograph? And so this has so little give between what is on the left and the right side of me, and people and trees and people on bikes and joggers. So I had about 2 feet left and right, and I had to zoom quite a bit, and I don't use a tripod. I usually don't have time. And so I just do my best to kind of stabilize with my own body. And so this is a very recent photograph. And I think this was used in the collaboration that I had with the New York Times a few months ago, where they would use my photographs and have readers try to pick where the photograph is taken out of 4 options in a multiple choice question. So this was the New York photograph. So if you go play the quiz, I just gave you away one of the answers. This is Miami, Florida, and walking around looking for things to do in Miami and to take photographs. And so I am inviting you into the photograph by using the rule of thirds. It's divided into 2/3 on the left and 1/3 on the right, and pretty precisely. And I would like to make a comment here that my photographs are in camera. There is no collage, there is no copy paste, there is no photoshopping. I adjust some contrast. I actually take away saturation and color often to just focus on composition. But what I do is I attempt my final composition as much as I can in camera, but I might take the same exact proportions, 3:4, and just adjust the angle in Photoshop. So to get that line that I'm implying here, the rule of thirds, that vertical here, to get that exactly at 0 degrees, I might get it at 1 degree by holding the camera, or maybe at 2 degrees. And so I make that adjustment and I just crop it into exactly what I want it to be. And this gives it the precisionism element, that there is a false safety and security when you look at the photograph, that it looks like it's the rule of thirds, which it is, and everything is sort of well organized. But there are elements that are unclear what is happening. And so these are separate structures of the same hotel/apartment complex. And the one on the left is further away. And there's a parking lot between me and the structure on the left. And the thing on the right is much closer to me. It's closer to the curb where I'm standing on the sidewalk. And so obviously they quote the same actually Argentinian artist who got in touch with me saying that he did this art on this building, which is a wonderful kind of circle of life. And so the one on the left, there is more light that hit it through its life. You can see that the paint is more sort of it's not as strong. It has been weathered and just under the elements. And then you see these lines that I'm not sure what they are. And then you see the vents, of course, and you see the reflection of light from other buildings. And the thing on the right completely looks like it's photoshopped. It looks like a clean version of the thing on the left, but it's absolutely untouched reality as I saw it. This is Vegas. A lady, somebody mentioned earlier that they're in Vegas. I adore Vegas. I love visiting. I like taking photographs there. This is the Wynn Casino, the building behind, the one with the 20 or so lines. And it completely dominates the space, which I love the disorienting, dimensionless element of this, that you can't quite figure out how big are these floors. I tell you they're floors, so now you can kind of figure it out. And they just have this hypnotic frequency of just they're longer and longer and longer as they go down. And there's a change in the gradient of the reflection because of the sky that it's reflecting. And then it's just in front of the sort of the hotel where cars drive by. That's where this tree is. It's just part of the front of the hotel. And the reflected tower is all the way across on the other side of Vegas. And it just looks like a beautiful red ambiguous thing that's reflected, but it's reflected in front of a tree in a thing in this Wynn Casino building. So enough conflicting visual elements that it's hard to sort of anchor yourself where you are in all of this, in this world that I'm proposing with this photograph. This photograph is here in Dallas, and one of these two things is not real, but not because I made it not real. It's a photograph of an advertisement. And so the thing on the left is the Texas-Dallas sky. And the thing on the right is, I believe, Absolute Vodka ad. And so I noticed that ad on some hotel in downtown Dallas, and I did not know what to do with it. So I tried mixing it with the sky, and it worked for me in this environment with the sky on the left, which is the real sky, just being this ambiguous blob of kind of clouds, but not overly shaped. And the thing on the right is, obviously, it could be computer generated, or I'm not sure how it's done, but that's just the ad. And I'm cutting off the elements of the ad with my zooming so you don't have a reference point. And the name of my photograph in this case is, to me, as joyful as the photograph itself, which is, should I stay or should I go? And if you just write that out or imagine kind of what that looks like, should I stay is the left, or is that middle concrete block, which is really what the ad is on, hooked onto, and then should I stay or should I go? Go being that rocket that's taking off. And so that's a song I really like from the band Clash, Should I Stay or Should I Go? And so that was the name I decided to give it. This is in New York City, and what you see are three different parts of two buildings. The middle section and the right section are one building that is just in itself a really fascinating building by a Danish architect, York Ingels, I think. And the thing on the left is just the building behind it, I think just across the street, maybe a block behind. And so what I have done here is redefined the notion of what is down and what is sideways and what is up. I have made exactly attempts in camera for the left and the right of this gray section to be perfectly balanced, to where the very middle of that is kind of solidifying to be the middle of the photograph. But that has nothing to do with the middle of which way gravity goes. But it's such balanced environment around it that I am comfortable in the photograph to say, this is the middle. I'm taking elements and I'm sort of painting with architecture and saying, this is real. I am making this the anchor. So I could say that this side facade, which is at a weird angle, is the anchor of the photograph. This is Dallas Opera, Winspear Opera building. Right in front of it, there's an awning. And this is a structure that I have shaken my fist at for about 4 years that I did not know what to do. I tried, and I just failed at getting a photograph that I enjoyed. This was also used in the New York Times quiz. I don't think it was this time. I collaborated with them a few times, and every time I insist on using a photograph of Dallas. And so that's a gift. If you play the quiz, there's going to be Dallas in there somewhere. And so the awning itself just has wonderful gradient and kind of variance of black and gray. And then I am making a letter X out of that awning and this supporting beam. And I'm using the bottom of that X. And in it, I'm placing a building that's behind, which is One Arts Plaza here in Dallas. And so that was enough to make it unclear, what is this photograph about? Which in general, I'm not only asking about my photographs, but the photography that I enjoy, where it is ambiguous. It's not a photograph of a person or a horse or a flower or a building. It's a photograph of what exactly? Is it a photograph of a letter X? Is it of the building behind? Is it of shadows? Is it of light? Which I guess is cliche. All of this is photography of light. But it's enough that I don't know. And that is when I'm pretty happy with a photograph. And I just let it ambiguously exist. This is one of the most recent photographs less than a year ago in New York City. I took a ferry across to New Jersey and just liked to observe the west side of Manhattan. And the buildings themselves are, to me, in this case, interesting because there was a lot of wind and it was cloudy. And you can see all of the variance in light in these kind of repeated shapes that you see in the middle and on the left and a little bit on the right. But you just see all sorts of, from dark to light, from kind of sharp colors to kind of more dull. And there's an overwhelming repeating pattern of just the same exact window and little balconies on top of these three sections and then repeated here. And this is just enough to keep me busy to make sense out of all of the light and what are the distances between these objects. And again, coming back to the sculptures of the everyday, the contemporary life around us, and how it's, to me, viewed as monuments of the modern day in which we currently share this existence. This is taking us to the other side of the world. This is in Hong Kong. And the journey that that took me to this photograph is itself, Hong Kong is very saturated with tall buildings because it's a fairly small city and a small island, the southern part of Hong Kong, the main island, if you will. And so it is on the backside of the island where there's more greenery and there are hills, nearly mountains. And then there was this fairly narrow apartment building and just perfectly surrounded with greenery that you can't quite tell the angle, you can't tell the kind of the depth, the height of the trees. And it was just enough for that to be kind of the background, the canvas. And then the building is just kind of painted. It's not really the rule of thirds, but it's definitely centered very nicely. And somebody that noticed this photograph in a different talk that I gave, they said that this building is very unique because if you notice, there are 2 floors, but there are also 3 floors. So this is one apartment. It's really 2 stories in this one section and 3 stories in a different section. So it's a massive apartment, quite a deep building. But of course, I'm not showing you that. I'm not giving you the comfort of knowing that. But it's a very unique building in itself, which I didn't know before. This is the Walt Disney Performance Hall, Symphonic Performance Hall in LA, downtown Los Angeles. And it's a Frank Gehry building. His buildings can look quite crazy. And I wanted to just study the building and see what I can do with this. And so I am using the building behind that has its own grayness. This is a color photograph, but the building behind has its own bend. It does a 90-degree turn without perfectly kind of curved surfaces. It's all sort of straight surfaces at different angles. But the one below, the Frank Gehry, is just sort of surreal. It's both sharp and dull, and all sorts of light is happening here. So, and the dance that it doesn't quite make it clear, is this color or not? It's it's enough for me to make a photograph out of it and not make any more statements. This is in Fort Worth, Burnett Plaza, one of the earliest photographs. So this collection of photographs that I'm sharing, and my whole photography journey has been maybe about 11 years or so. This is at the very beginning, maybe within the first year, that I started rethinking how do you take a photo of a building that will have a conceptual, perhaps emotional, intellectual connection for me, rather than really posing the question, is it a good photograph? I rarely ask that question in any serious way. I have photographs that interest me and photographs that don't. And it's far too murky and subjective. Do I worry about it? Is it a good photograph or not? So this attracted me as a canvas on which these elevator shafts are projected. And then you kind of first notice that, and then you notice, what is this thing behind it, but really kind of in front of it. So the canvas is really in front, but I'm sort of implying that I'm using the shafts, and then the canvas is the windows and they're behind. So there is a little bit of a give and take of what is the physical reality. And a wonderful, lucky thing here is that it was not overly strong light. And that allows for these shadows not to be overly strong, which I, in this case, benefit from because it's not taking your attention and your kind of mind and your processing power to make sense out of the depth of this. It's a little bit vague, and that worked. And this is just commentary when I say that I don't quite pose if questions are if photographs are good or not. I recognize that this is among the most popular photographs of mine, that when I collaborate with somebody, often it happens that they would get my pitch, which is mostly how things happen, and then we talk, and then they look at the rest of my photographs. And even if this is not included in my pitch, they would often pick this up as an interesting photograph to use it in a story or whatever the thing may be. This photograph is through COVID. It's here in Dallas at Fair Park, a wonderful large park full of Art Deco buildings and architecture and structures of all different kinds. And this is a performance venue of some kind. I forget its name right now. So what you see, the performance hall, is the left and the right side. I am quoting the rule of thirds. So the structure on the left and the right, that is the same exact structure. These are sort of rings, and it's kind of a covered performance space, outdoor but covered. And so, but there's a shadow hitting. So this is all shadow, but the shadow hasn't hit the right side. And I'm wanting this. I recognize that I wanted this, and I came back and I kind of timed it. And this required climbing on a really narrow ledge, and this dislocated my knee briefly. So kind of at the edge of dislocating it. It was quite painful, but it was very much worth it. And so to me here, at once it looks like we're safe. It's rule of thirds. It's sort of beautiful gradient colors. The material, especially on the right, looks clean and pristine. But then you start seeing the thing on the left and you go, okay, so there are different colors. What does this really mean? And then you see the thing in the middle, which is this old wall that looks like it has these holes for maybe nails or screws where you can put banners for describing the performance, and you see all sorts of sort of wear and tear. So at once it's a well-organized, pleasant photograph, but it's also not. And there's dirt, and there's kind of broken wall and broken facade. And then there's the sky, the clear, crisp Dallas sky. And so the name of this photograph, to me, this visually deeply quoted one of another of my very dear painters that I dearly love, Georgia O'Keeffe. And so the name of this is the Georgia O'Keeffe Good Morning. It's a loving homage to Georgia O'Keeffe that I imagine is she does have a lot of photographs where she would paint paintings where there's the sun, and the sun has these rings that change the kind of the heaviness of the yellow and goes into the red of the sun. And so I'm using that in here as I think of painters, I think much more of painters than photographers, I think, when I go and I take photographs. This is just a surrealist, making you guess and wonder what exactly is happening, because is there a high rise at a ski resort that you would have a high rise like that and this takes gondolas full of skiers, or is it something else? And there's nothing with the building to really help you out. And the building has kind of an attractive variety of windows, and there's a little bit of an opening, and there's some big cylinder in there, and that cylinder repeats here at the bottom about 20 floors below. You don't know how low the building goes, if I can put it that way. You don't know how high it goes. So I'm kind of implying this ambiguous infinity. And there's just this cable car thing happening. And this is New York City. And it has a cable car that goes to one of the islands in the Hudson River. I'm sorry, not Hudson. East River has Roosevelt Island. So it's just a wonderful, strange combination. And these cables, on the side, they go to the corner, lower left, lower right. And on the left side, they go kind of in the middle. So that kind of anchors and stretches the canvas of the photograph. It was just enough for me to consider that this to me is an interesting photograph. This is in Austin, and I spent a lot of time looking around, and I just see this reflection in a building that I wanted it to be, again, fully dominating the visual space. There's no breathing room. There's no anchor point. There's no tree, human, other building label. There's no sign. Of course, I'm extracting those out by my composition. But there's this building that is reflecting on the left side, but the building itself is beautifully cascading. That you see a little bit of it, and you kind of don't understand its shape, but it kind of goes downwards, but it has its openings on the facade. So it has its own layering. And so that is only happening on this half of the photograph, and the other half is just this counterbalance of nothingness. And it kind of gives you this breathing room, and it gives you this counterbalance of enjoying the thing on the left side.
I'm going to interrupt for half a second.
Please.
Go back to that photo. That is my building. That actually may be my office on that edge of that corner there. All right. That's enough of that.
So wait, what is your building? The building is your building, or the one that's reflected is your building?
The one that's reflected. It's One American.
Okay. Oh, wonderful. Yeah. So that's on the main street. I forgot the name now. Yeah.
6th and Congress. All right.
That is great. Thank you. It would be great if you're in the background doing your work and I somehow took a photo of you and now we see you in here. Yeah.
I'm probably not.
So this is Vegas. This is the I forget the name of the Pyramid Casino on the left side of the main avenue going south north. I forget the name, but it's just it's really hard for people to understand what's happening. Meaning, I'm saying that from the data of knowing what people say when they see this. What exactly are they seeing? What I am seeing, why I took this photograph, is there's so many competing zigzag patterns. There is the main one, this kind of darkened one that is almost on the left side of a rule of thirds. And there's this counter to that is this other rule of thirds, that this shape doesn't really exist, that bluish one. This dark one doesn't really exist. I'm using the structure and its angles and the light and the shadow. And so you have 1 and 2, and then you have these edges that are kind of the same, nicely sandwiching and giving you a sense of kind of balance. But what's happening here is these are steps. These, where my mouse is on the left side, those are steps. They are normal to the ground. They just go up. The same with these. And this is just a decorative fountain on the back of a casino hotel in Vegas. And that middle thing would be water, but there was no water when I was there. So that is at about a 45-degree angle. But I'm completely re-anchoring this and saying I am comfortable enough to just, I've taken enough away from the photograph that I can re-anchor it. And I'm not just flipping a photograph of a building upside down, because that's sort of a different artistic statement that doesn't interest me much. But in this case, I have left enough to hopefully keep you interested, taken enough that I have the freedom to re-anchor this and play with the reality that I share with you in the photograph. Here, it's a wonderful brutalist building. I believe it's a hotel in downtown San Francisco. And I have looked at this building for a long time and wanted to do something with it. And once I was in San Francisco, I spent a lot of time. It's really tricky light-wise to get a good angle of this building. It doesn't work out. You have to be on the other side, the way San Francisco is positioned on the globe and where it is from the equator. That's just the reality. So close to the end of the day, as light was kind of disappearing, all of these wonderful shadows and angles started appearing. So I just love the way that it's making the left side really almost invisible. The right side starts having this half arrow shape. So I decided to just publish it. This is actually not published yet, but I decided to just keep it at a really, I made my own angle and made this look like more of a pyramid than it really is. This is in New York City. Frank Gehry is the architect of the building on the right. This is all the way on the west side of Manhattan. And just the building in itself, you know, if I was to just crop out and use that building on the not crop out, just zoom in and take the building on the right, the Frank Gehry, it is, I mean, it literally looks that I'm not sure you would care or anybody, just like, okay, it's some weird stuff. I don't know if it's real. I don't know if these are real windows. I don't know where this is in the world. Okay, it's some weird structure. So I liked adding to it the other building across, which is, again, a whole bunch of blue and transparent and dark, kind of yellow and white and black. And it almost quotes the same color spectrum. And it just looks like it's collaged, the building on the front. And this gives it a little bit of a hint that this is something real, but it takes away enough that it's unclear what exactly is happening. And am I just copying and pasting these facade elements? This is a photograph that interested in me because I was playing with a new structure in Dallas, which is this oval-shaped element. This is just an awning that goes, this kind of cover that goes around a full 360 around a public park in downtown Dallas. And that interested me. And what I did in this case, I was able to take a photograph from just standing underneath it. My camera opened up about as wide as it can go, I think at about 24, 5, 6 millimeters. And I was able to use that awning to frame this photograph differently and to pose the question, is this framed to be sort of an oval frame, and do you just ignore the rest of it? Because that awning, the kind of yellowish, bronzish structure, does it add to the photograph? Does it take your attention away? Does it balance itself with the main subject? What is the main subject? Again, I would make an argument that awning could be the main subject. The side of this building is very much centered per my decision. So is this side of a building that is the least interesting, is that the subject? Is it the reflection of the Sheraton Hotel? I never really show any letters in my photographs, but I know this is Sheraton, and it's something there. It's unclear. There is no help. There is no breathing room. There is no tree. There is no anchoring point. And so that, to me, loses you enough in the surreal interpretation of the modern everyday that it finishes the photograph, and I don't want to do anything else with it. This photograph was a playful look through some PVC pipes that are decorative pipes in front of a museum in Milan in Italy, the Prada Museum. The museum itself was quite interesting, but the photograph that I really enjoyed was the one here. And what I started thinking about was, when you look at the world through these PVC, I say PVC, I don't know if they are, they're just plastic 3-inch tubes. They're transparent, but they are solid plastic of some kind. So they bend light in ways that is interesting to consider. They are transparent, but they're bending, and they're giving me different versions of these actual light poles. So the dance with these realities, these are light poles, and I'm bending their light as they hit my camera because they go through this. And the sky is beautiful. So even taking a photo of just the beautiful blue sky and the blue, really transparent tubes, it is enough for me to be interested. And then you throw in these luckily well-balanced light poles. This one has 2 lights, the one behind has 1. And you can see like almost 7 or 8 versions of each of these. And that is just so much to look at and consider about light and existence to me, that this was enough of a photograph. And at once, it's very much not giving you anything, not giving you any freedom and any sort of free space to think, but it also is, because right behind it is just the open sky. And there's very few things in it, but yet I'm constricting you to them. I'm keeping you very close to these tubes. That's my perception of it. And the name of this is The Speed of Lights. because I'm taking the lights, which are these street lights, and I'm bending their speed at which they're hitting my eye, which is really the camera. And it's enough for me to use the photograph. This is two buildings here in Dallas that are really far from each other, and I'm really far from them. And this is about as good as I can do with my camera on full zoom with no tripod. And they just look like they are quoting the same type of a window shape. The one in the background is Parkland Hospital. The one in the front is Renaissance Hotel. And the Renaissance Hotel has kind of this egg shape. So there is beautiful gradient. And the Parkland Hospital has a gradient in itself that goes up, down purely by how it's colored. But this building doesn't. It's gradient because it's just how the light was. And then you zoom in on the hotel in the middle, and you see that there's this earthy, sort of a rustic, I don't know if I'm describing it well, facade that is just, that's the decorative way that they did it. No give to you on what exactly is happening, which just gives you enough to hopefully keep you interested in the photograph. This is downtown Dallas, close to the Trinity River. Minutes before I took this photograph, I actually fell into the Trinity, meaning I was, a foot deep trying to jump on a rock and then jump on the other side. But it didn't work out. But it was worth it to get to take this photograph. I spent a lot of time under various overpasses. I believe this is the split between 30 and 35. And this just gives you these really powerful visual dividers that I can then play with by moving around. And there's nobody there, so I'm left alone to just play with this. And so what is interesting to me is I know that we can share and understand that this is a highway, some sort of an overpass, but then things get interesting. The top is a blue sky with a little bit of a building. The bottom looks like a digitized version of the top. And the bottom is that same building you see on top, but it's totally filling your space. So it kind of tricks you into thinking for a moment that is the sky. It is that same building. This is the Hyatt Hotel in Dallas, where the tower is. And so that building and the bottom are the same, but they visually look like they're repeating itself, these visual structures. And the reflection you see is the building across the street way behind my back. The way that it just clicked together was enough of an urban snapshot of what life in an urban space, what kind of visuals it can produce. This was taken in Chicago, close to the University of Chicago. And this photograph, that was also used at some point in the Times in the same thing. We've done 3 quizzes so far, and they've done this. They've used this in the first one, I believe. And this photograph took the longest for me to decide to use it. I think about 3 years of this sitting for me to consider, will I use the photograph? I had about 20 versions of it. And so I decided to go for this because I know we can understand that the bottom is grass, the top is trees, tree branches and leaves, but you don't see the actual tree. I'm implying and I'm telling you it's there, but you don't see the sky behind. You see this nearly perfect grass below with wonderful lights and waves. And then this completely ambiguous digital set of things in the middle, these squares or rectangles. And that's just some sort of a container, storage container that on the other side, it's a store of some kind. It's some student activity. But I'm using that as this ambiguous natural/digital visual that it's just unclear enough of what exactly is happening and what happens just outside of the left and the right side, and the tree is visible just pixels off to each side. This is in Italy, Milan. This is a building that has these little cutouts. This is a soccer club, Milan Football Club, soccer club. And they have that on the roof, a couple of kind of these cutouts of a person running to hit a soccer ball. So I just identified one of them, and I organized it in a way that you have to kind of try to navigate, is this building on an angle? Is the building itself kind of on an incline? So it kind of goes downwards, but how is the inside of the building? Where is 90 degrees? Where is 0 degrees? And so I like that ambiguity. I'm using the top of the building wherever it might be pointing to, but I'm using that as the sort of flat plane. And that I have just reorganized it and cropped it in Photoshop by just adjusting the last like half a degree. And there is only one black line that perfectly points to this human. So there is enough here to try to understand the physical space around you. The name of this photograph from downtown Dallas is "What Can Brown Do for You?" And I'm posing a question that there's a wonderful photographer from Finland, Arno Minkinen, and Arno Rafael Minkinen is his name. And he has a 40-year career in taking photographs of his often nude body, but you really don't see the whole body. You see his arms and legs and fingers just in nature, just his body and the body of the nature of Earth. And I always thought a lot about that. And here there's 3 bodies that are really intersecting, not the 3 things you see, the 3 pillars, but there is the building behind. There are the 3 pieces of whatever, beams of some kind, 3 pieces of wood. And mine is the 3rd body, me making a choice to move my body exactly where it needed to be for kind of these 3 bodies to line up. And the 3 things that you see, this is a billboard. Billboard is just cut off, so you don't have that welcoming realization. And they've been around for a long time. I don't know why they're different like this. I don't know whether it's more, I guess the one on the right is the oldest. And they sort of themselves have different textures and different types of the color of brown, but the building is full of different types of the color brown. And that was enough for me to propose, like, what is the subject here? Is it the building? Is it the 3 pillars? Is it the middle pillar? Can you make an argument, and I don't think we can, that my body moving the correct way, I'm behind the scenes, but I was the crucial body in this? And I mean this, of course, just conceptually. I don't know. I leave it as such for people to figure out. This is, I always say where it is, just to kind of have you dance around the world with me. This is in a small village in Romania. I was born and raised in Serbia in Eastern Europe. And when I often visit Serbia, I then travel around. So I crossed the border and went to Romania. And so this to me does so many wonderful things. This is just a canopy on a building that is being redone, just fixed up. And it's just a canopy, but the canopy, if you just look at the sort of this, it looks like it's chiseled, like it was chiseled in 1352, or it looks like an ancient sculpture, but it's just cloth. You can see through it. And then this one place, the cloth is obviously ripped up to where this beautiful thing comes through. And it's beautiful in so many ways. And then the rest is still covered. And then there's the very clean sky with 3 lines. The airport is close by. And so there's just plenty of traffic, airline traffic. And so I'm sort of not letting you quite understand which way the building goes, but that is just the top of the building. I'm pretty much right underneath it. But you can't tell where this is kind of anchored, but just these are such massive, heavy, immovable objects the way they appear, but they're not. They're as they can be punctured, they can be taken away, they can be cut up. They're so delicate, but they don't look so, and they just look nearly ominous. And then you have this really happy, simple shape. This completely blew me away when I later on recognized what the photograph is, and I present it as such. This is called The Cross. It is just, I in some ways don't have, and I don't want to say more. It is a place of a lot of just peace and quiet and calm and contemplating for me. It is not a church, it is a museum, but to me, museums are the places where most deep thinking happens in my life. And this is just a support beam. Nothing is just at the Getty Museum. It's a gorgeous museum that is beautifully done. But you have the cross that is made of stone, and the stone is really sharp and really well lit. And then the stone behind is stone, but it's very smooth and doesn't have the kind of this curvatures on it and kind of the shape on it. And so it's very different, but yet it's quite the same. And then you have the shadows of whatever this is supporting just coming down at these really inconsistent angles. That here, that is the shadow from above, but this is extended. So obviously there's a beam behind this that makes that. So you notice these different shapes. And I think I took 2 photographs that whole day at the Getty, and here it is. It just is enough, even without any particular story. This is going back to Vegas, and this is just so many things that are put together in one visual space. None of them quite clear what they're doing. It looks so much more painterly that you recognize that there is some glass at the front, but maybe it's plastic, maybe it's glass. I'm kind of quoting the rule of thirds. It splits it left, right, almost splits it top, bottom. The dead is at a nice corner. What is that structure behind? There's an opening in it, but that opening has a weird ending. There's a really well-balanced reflection that works with whatever that line is. This is the middle of the photograph, but it doesn't really exist. It's a reflection. The thing on the left balances this. Then at the bottom, it just looks like some Mondrian painting, that these lines can live and breathe. This little line has its purpose. There's a structure behind this structure that it repeats. There's so much happening that this thing goes perfectly in the corner. All of these, of course, are my choices, but there's just 57 different things happening. And it's just, I think if I was to print this and put it on a piece of paper, it would be perfectly balanced, almost in this physical weighted way. We are at age 28, so I will keep that in mind for Linda, as I will talk another about 2 minutes, and then I will take Linda's lead on what to do next. This is in Denver, and it is a wonderful structure at the front. It's the Denver Museum of Art, and I apologize if the name is maybe the Museum of Denver or whatever it is. And it's just a wonderful, strange building. And then I found a way to throw in the building that's way behind in downtown Denver. And that was enough to make a dance between the two of them and still give you a little bit of breathing room above with the open sky. This is in Macau, sort of the part of China, but not really, kind of an autonomous republic, but not really the way Hong Kong was, but is no longer. Macau still is independent. So this is a casino in Macau, and I love the amount of angles and amount of just heaviness taking place, so much to absorb. And then your eye just finally finds something that is different than the rest of it, which is this unexplained red dot, if you will, in the corner. This to me really plays as what I mentioned with sort of the structures of the contemporary modern life and the monuments to the world we live in. That this on the right is a very, very expensive bridge here in Dallas from Santiago Calatrava that was tens of millions of dollars, and it looks quite lovely, and it's in some ways this thing that Dallas is proud of, but also it's so very expensive. And on the left are power lines that just do their business nicely and quietly. And when you identify them and isolate them like this, they talk. They dance together well. You can almost see that the distance between the two sides of the bridge, they're kind of repeated here. And you can see almost that there is this connective force between these two, that you can think of them as a single unit. The thing on the right is a piece of art, if you will, very expensive one. And everybody in Dallas appreciates it and knows about it. And there's cables and there's tension keeping it alive. And sure as hell, there's tension in these power lines that are just power lines. And one is white, the other one is black, but yet they kind of do a similar thing if you pose that question visually. I will go to the next photo, and I'm going to stop there and then wait for Linda's commentary. This is Italy, Milan. The building on the left is kind of this new green initiatives all over the world to have a lot of balconies and a lot of trees and greenery. And so I noticed that the tree on the right, or trees, look like the building on the left. So in essence, the name of this photograph is Nature Imitating Architecture, Imitating Nature. That the tree on the right looks like the building on the left, and the building on the left is trying to look like a regular forest with all the greenery on it. So I walked around until I found a way to make them even out as much as I could, and they are balanced enough, and there is not much more that I could do with that photograph. So I will stop here for a second and just hear from Linda to get guidance. What should we do?
This is what I'm going to do, and this is what I'm going to be very selfish about. I'm going to ask you to basically close out your presentation. I'm going to see if you could possibly...
You want me to stop sharing or continue?
Why don't you go and stop sharing? I'm curious if you could offer us, you've showed us a lot of photos. I'm wondering if you could offer us a couple of tips, being the photographers. What, when you approach a building, what do you look for? This is something, I don't do a lot of architecture photography. In fact, I almost do none. I will shoot it when I'm with other people that get really excited, and they have to point out things for me to go, oh yeah, I see that. And as I'm going through as you were going through your photos, I'm like, there was, I believe it was Susan Hansen in here that said, you can't imagine how many wows she has said as you're flipping through your photos. I felt the same way, and it got me excited about, okay, I really need to give this another shot. But if I were to approach my downtown building, I just don't see what you're seeing. So is there any way that you could just kind of, I don't know, give us a little hint of where to start? Because it's overwhelming.
Well, it's the simplest way that I would frame this is for any of us here, of all the photographers here, I take photographs, and I hope for everybody to that they have their own truth and experience. I take photographs of what I love. Mm-hmm. And what I'm interested in. I can't say that I know it. I'm not an architect, but I'm deeply interested in architecture, and I just enjoy seeing architecture, and I follow things. And so I'm deeply interested, which means I can go and take photographs for 10 hours and take 500 photographs and then spend 3 days getting 2 photographs and then thinking about them for 3 years. Right. So within the space of love, I could now, what I'm about to say, I think applies if you want to take photos of buildings or horses or flowers or motorcycles or people, that it's the same relationship, that because I'm interested, whatever my perception of, well, this building does not offer anything interesting unless I want to take a photo and go, hey, buy your apartment or rent here or get your office here. So if it's not interesting, it's not interesting to me. And I know that doesn't help much, but what I mean by that is I look at architecture all the time and I notice little things and I shake my fist and I go, this is interesting. But why is it interesting? What about it? And I look around and I go, how can this dance with this city, Dallas, any city? And then I have routines of what I do mentally that I go, okay, what if I walk back a lot? What if I go on the other side? What if on the western side, there's more things you can do with this building where I hide some truths of the building, bring other truths from other buildings, and start building a surreal space that is completely real, to the point where I'm holding my camera. I think I might have a good photo when I hold my camera and I look through the viewfinder and I literally go, I don't understand what I just did. I'm standing here. The world here makes sense. The world here with my limitations, I hope might make less sense, but it's interesting and I wonder what's happening. And I don't know what those are. For me, I just know that I go, what's happening here? And I go from there.
Well, because a lot of those photos, I'm thinking, what is happening? And I kind of want to look, turn my head, because I really did have a hard time with that dimensional structures.
And I think the trickery, which is where I, through years of doing this and looking for my space of pitching and collaborating and selling photographs and having them be a part of archives and museums and projects, I need to understand my truth. I need to understand what is the language of what is it that I do. So it is not minimalist photography that I just give absolutely the smallest amount of some beautiful thing on a building. I try to find for me what is the right amount of, you don't have enough here for me to care. And I don't want to give you too much because then like, oh, okay, it's a photo of this part of Dallas. Great. So if I can find that balance point, then to me that becomes interesting. And I still have no idea, is it a good photograph or is it not? But to me, the balance in it and the questions that I pose, they're interesting to me. If they're interesting to the viewer, they might want to look at my photographs, think about my photographs. And so I certainly recognize that. And that is the end of my understanding which way it goes. I pose those questions. I try to figure it out as I go. But I'm so interested in architecture. And think about how many, I was in Shreveport 3 weeks ago and I spent 3 hours there, took photos, loved them, reached out to the Shreveport Times, and they're like, great. And they ran a story on it. And that is a joy in itself that I'm like, great. Now they ran a story about my photography. And people from Shreveport reach out to me and like, where did you find this? I live here. I don't know where this building is. And there's a shared public enjoyment for me to go, this is where it is. Here are the coordinates. And on my website, this sounds like I'm selling my website. But if you go to my website, every photograph not every photo you saw is still published. So a lot of photos are not published yet. I'm in no hurry. But at the bottom, it just gives you the coordinates. You click it, you go to Google Maps, you go to Street View, look around, and you can start understanding what is it that I saw. And then you go from there maybe and you do your own stuff.
Yeah, I wanted to point that out to people to run to your website, because when I was on it, I thought, wait a minute, what are these numbers? And then I realized he's got the coordinates of basically where he's standing. So
yeah,
that was really I'd never seen anything like that. And I thought it was really clever. And so I'm curious, what is your background? I didn't ask you. Do you have an art background, design, engineering?
It's design, but I have a computer science background, computer science degrees. And so I do a lot of work in design and making things fit and work together. And in essence, what I look for in software and what is good for me is elegant, balanced design. And so that same experience goes to look for the well-ordered world around me and look at chaos, look at unpredictable randomness of urban places and go, but wait, here is my little peace and calm done. And I share the time, I share the coordinates, and that to me is one little bookmark on this planet. And it's infinite. You can go travel in so many different ways and find these things that to me are a way to connect with the world.
Okay. There were two questions that I want to put in front of you, just so that I'm not ignoring everybody else. These are all these, like, Linda wants to know questions, but Anne's question is, because she wants to know is what sort of settings generate the flat, sharp images? That's kind of a technical question. Do you?
Well, I rarely take kind of these steep photographs. It's usually flattened. So I'm at a flat plane. I'm zooming, which gives it the flatness, or I'm elevated, usually in a parking garage. And so that gives me a place to just be, right in front of the buildings. But often with zoom, it flattens your space. Well, and as I mentioned, I look for light, and I will give you an example. What is the name? Matt Damon is a special agent in Bourne Identity. So he has a scene where he enters a cafe and meets somebody, and he's like telling the guy, that car has a broken headlight, that tire is this, the bathroom is this way, that guy has a knife. That is how I view the world around me. As I walk around buildings, I'm scanning everything constantly and thinking, wait, at 3 o'clock, the sun is going to be here. I can walk back there. Oh, at 4 o'clock, it's going to be here. I can be here. And so there's a lot of processing in my mind that goes into trying to figure out what photo to take.
Let me ask this question. Are all the photos that you showed tonight, would they be on your website? Do you know? There was
not all of them, because quite a few of them are newer and just not published. My website has only 85 published photographs ever, and I probably had shown about 45 tonight. And my guess is, I don't know, but maybe 10, 15 of them are not on the website.
The reason I asked was early. It was like one of maybe the first 5 pictures, photos that you showed. And Susan Hansen, if you're in here, You're welcome to come back on to your speaker. But she had a question, and it came after you went past the photo.
Okay.
But it was, she wanted to know, where were you standing when you took the bridge photo?
Oh, the Brooklyn Bridge photo. I stood. You can find and that is a very new photograph. So the name of the pier is like number 13 or 14 on the east side of Manhattan. You can just look for that building. One Manhattan Plaza, one Manhattan something is the building. You can find it in Google Maps, and I am down from there. Maybe half a mile, and you can just try to figure out where I lined it up with the bridge. So from that building, about half a mile south, and I was just looking for I can open up Google Maps now, or I can email you, Linda, exactly where I was, and you can share it. Sure. But that's where I was. From that building, about half a mile down, and I had about this much space between like a trash can and like people riding their bikes. But I'll send you the exact coordinates for it. I happily always do. So I'll share it with you, Linda, and then you can share it.
It looked like you were right on top of it. That's why I wondered.
Yeah, like it's just there was a good zoom used, nothing crazy. It was really narrowly threaded to not have other trouble in the way. So I have the coordinates. I forget the pier number, but they're piers, so it's easy to I can just give you that as a reference point. And you can probably go to Street View, because they have it all the way up and down. It's a very kind of a frequently visited area. So I can like pinpoint it about within 2-3 feet where I was, and you can just kind of find the rectangle and then kind of zoom in and you can find it.
Great. Thanks, Nikola. Okay. Thank you, Susan, for coming back in, because I wasn't quite sure which one you were referring to. Nikola, I want to say thank you. And then before I say thank you for coming, I'm wondering, can I get you to come back again?
Oh, gladly. I love doing these things. And so, anytime, just,
because I know, I would love to see more photos. And I found the stories fascinating. And because I'm a traveler, I was really excited to see some of these buildings that I've heard of. I've just not made the time to go really look at them. So that was really kind of fun for me.
Wonderful.
Thank you for coming and sharing, all these wonderful photos and the stories behind them and just your vision. And that was really, really cool.
Thank you. Thank you.
So everybody, if you're on Instagram, please go look at his account, and you can find him at Nikola Olic, and you can connect with him through his website, structurephotography.org. Next week, Morgan Morrison will be here to present The Art of Creating Fine Art Prints. And so until next time, go out and create something beautiful. And I hope that we see you again soon.